Right, let's move on, because Man United beaten 1-0 last night at Old Trafford. Not the first time in this competition that they've been disappointing at home. It certainly doesn't mean that the competition's over for them. That's what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is saying. Daniel Harris is with us this morning. Daniel, this one feels a little bit different than the PSG game, in that we were making the case earlier, Owen was certainly making the case earlier, that this Barcelona team have a more winning mentality than Paris Saint-Germain. And yet, I don't know, how do you assess Manchester United's chances after that game last night?
They've got a chance. They've got more of a chance probably than it looked like they had before they played Paris. But United aren't going to win Champions League this season. I mean, if they did, it would be one of the most ludicrous things that ever happened in the history of the competition. So it's not exactly about that. I mean, you would want them to go into the tie thinking they can win it, to go into the next leg thinking they can win it. But when you look to evaluate their performance, you're not just looking at what the score was, what you think might happen in the next game, but you're looking for positives that can make them into a better team when they can have a proper go at it next season. And I think there were reasons to be cheerful that we saw on the pitch last night. And I mean, there are also reasons to not be cheerful, because if you're relying on Barcelona to beat Liverpool and or Manchester City, I'm not so sure about that one. And I think that it was one of those games that you watch and it reminds you that the standard in the Champions League this year is not very high. If you think about what previous Barcelona teams would have done to this United team, if you think about previous United teams and how good they are compared to this lot, it's wide open because no one's really all that good.
Is it fair to say that the likes of Dalot, McTominay, Fred held their own at the very worst in that midfield battle yesterday?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the thing with Fred, to start with him, is that he's got some ability. Whether he's a £55 million player or good enough to make a real difference in a continuing way is yet to be seen. But he's showing flashes of being able to do stuff. The problem with Fred, I think, is less in the Champions League and more in the Premier League, where the physical nature of the game and the lack of time he gets on the ball has been a problem. And I mean, we saw it the other night at Wolves, the previous game, where he had a terrible game and got caught in possession prior to one of the goals. So last night he had a lot more time on the ball because Barcelona don't really have the legs in midfield to press, and he had a really good game. What McTominay did was actually more interesting. It seems really facile to make a comparison between McTominay and Darren Fletcher. Darren Fletcher was Scottish, McTominay has a Scottish name, but there are really obvious similarities between them, because I think both of them have this real terse, aggressive, articulate confidence in the way that they speak that reflects the way that they play football. Where lots of other people don't believe in them, but because managers that they respect have told them to believe in themselves and that they're good enough, they do. And I don't really think we saw a lot from McTominay last season that suggested he could be a Manchester United player. But this season, and particularly lately, he's been a lot better. He gets the ball, he gives it simply but intelligently. He has the mentality. I remember there was an occasion last night, I think it was in the first half, where as he was getting on the ball, he was busy barking instructions and pointing his arms at Ashley Young to get outside and to get down the line. And for a 22-year-old kid to be doing that to a seasoned professional shows you that he's got confidence and also that he's thinking about the game. He's also a brilliant athlete in the way that Fletcher was, and he speeds the game up, and he just seems like one of those people that you just don't want to play against because nothing will come easily. Whether he turns out to be good enough to be a first choice for United, and thinking about the standard of team that United would like to be, obviously he's not a slam dunk in the way that young players that we've previously seen at United were, but he's beginning to look like someone who at the very least is worth having around the squad. So if you were to look at the squad now and think, well, it looks like Herrera's going to leave, it looks like Matic has lost his place to McTominay and is finished anyway. If you were to then go and buy two midfield players, then Fred and McTominay would be able to be your spare players who could come in and do something effective. So, yeah, I think McTominay was a huge plus last night and probably in the most effective player on the pitch in a lot of ways. And Dalot is another one who also has that mentality. You can, like, he's in no game that he's played in has he shrunk. He'll make mistakes because he's a human, and obviously we all make mistakes, I believe. And I think that what he's got is he's got pace, he's got strength, and even though he looks like a bar mitzvah boy, he doesn't play like a bar mitzvah boy. He's got, I mean, his confidence. He does have a lot of confidence, but his confidence isn't misplaced. Like those of us who've been bar mitzvah boys will be able to tell you. And he looks like he could be a player, and he can play in a variety of positions. He can play at right back, he can play at left back, he can play on the right of a diamond, he can play on the left of a diamond. And I'm not sure where he'll go in the end, but nothing that we've seen from him has suggested that he's going to be overawed by anything or that he's not good enough to play at whatever level he's asked to play at.
Like, that's obviously something that comes from Solskjaer's impact. Like, you don't want to overstate it too much in terms of these young men who naturally would be very, very confident anyway to have got to that position where they're in the Manchester United first team. Like, at what point, and I hate to get back into like the transfer window again this summer, at what point does Solskjaer have to look at these players and say, I can trust them to become elite talents, to become players who might be able to anchor a midfield or perhaps be a starting player week in, week out for 30 plus games in a Premier League season and actually take us to within a title challenging team or perhaps winning trophies in Europe again? Like, is the confidence that Solskjaer is giving them at the moment, is that going to take them to a level of ability over the next couple of years where they can be elite players?
In fairness to Dalot in particular, he hasn't really shown that much more under Solskjaer that we hadn't seen under Mourinho. He looked quite good every time he played with Mourinho, although strangely I thought he played really well in the first half at Anfield of Mourinho's last game, and obviously Mourinho hooked him at half-time. But I felt like all I'm seeing from Dalot now I'd seen before. I think that I would be reticent to sign a right-back if I was Solskjaer because of Dalot. I would say that next season he should probably play 30 games and there be an interregnum with Young. And then the season after that, he should be the full-time right-back if that's the position they think is the right position for him. McTominay in midfield, I think, is not. They need something more in midfield. What you saw with United last night was there was a lack of class around the Barcelona box. When they got into good positions, they lacked a bit of composure to do the right thing next. And McTominay's not going to be solving that next season or the season after. He's a player that you want to have in the squad who might play a bit deeper or you might be able to play a box-to-box role, but United still need to buy 2 midfield players. Herrera looks like he's going to leave. Matic should not be someone you want to really rely on at all next season, so you need to sign 2 midfield players, and they need to be good midfield players. They need to be midfield players who are going to come in and make a difference immediately and elevate the level of the team. So those guys, I think, would be part of your squad next season, but not necessarily first choices. There are lots of other young players around at United who are also the club are very excited about, but who probably aren't quite ready to break through next season, but might be people who could come in and play a role next season. So let's say Mata leaves, and he's another one I think that they should let leave because his minutes should be going to players like Tahi Chong, Angel Gomez, Mason Greenwood. Between them, they should be able to cover the minutes that Mata would have and start making a difference, given that Mata doesn't make a lot of difference. But the players that United go and buy have to be players that are actually going to come in and elevate the squad pretty much immediately, not players that are going to go and just hang about, but actually go straight into the first team and make the team better. And that's what United need if they're going to challenge for the league to begin with.
If you're Chris Smalling in the second leg, Daniel, and you see one of the best talents we've ever seen in world football running towards your arm, are you moving it away?
If I'm still struggling with it. If I'm Chris Smalling, I'm thinking many different things there. No, I would say that if you're looking at like egregious assaults in that game, that is not one of the ones that I would look at. I thought Smalling had a really good game last night, and I think that it's a rough game, and sometimes you will get hurt, particularly if you're very good and very small. And I would say that if you're looking at egregious fouling last night, then Busquets could have been sent off probably twice. And it's not particularly a complaint because you want people to err on the side of caution when it comes to showing cards and sending players off. But the first reducer that Busquets was allowed was a very high level of allowed reducer, I thought. But I think that United might have a slightly more of a problem in the Camp Nou because the pitch is bigger than at Old Trafford, and when you play a team like Barcelona and they're better than you, what you're looking for is to try and make the pitch as small as possible, like Barcelona trying to make it as wide as possible. And I think that United might struggle because Messi's going to find it easier to find space on a bigger pitch, and Barcelona's fullbacks will be able to stay higher and wider. On the other hand, it will leave space for United to do something on the break. But I would say that, that advantage, it'll be much harder for Lionel Messi to run into Chris Smalling's elbow because he'll be spending much more time avoiding him, and it will be easier to avoid him because there's more space to avoid him in.
Daniel, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
No, see you again.